Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a double shot of good news. South Africa gets its first delivery of vaccines to start rolling out its inoculation program for Covid-19. Not long afterwards, President Cyril Ramaphosa eases restrictions, saying that the country's over the worst of the second wave. Also, Britain brings in its first sanctions against Zimbabwean officials by announcing asset and travel bans against 4 security chiefs over the deaths of 23 people during crackdowns in 2018 and 2019 in the country. And Kenyan giraffes are sent down the river as conservationists race against the rising waters to save it and other trapped animals from an island in Lake Baringo. But first, South Africa has passed the peak of its second wave, said the country's president on Monday evening as he announced the easing of restrictions. Cyril Ramaphosa's address came as the country worst hit by coronavirus on the continent received its first shipment of Covid-19 vaccines, 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca inoculation. Health workers are due to be the first in line as South Africa races to try and vaccinate at least 67% of the population by the end of 2021. Sam Bradpiece has more.
Restrictions are temporary, loss of life is permanent. Those the words of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in his address to the nation this evening. He struck a cautiously optimistic tone, regarding those restrictions, easing a number of them really quite significantly. South Africans can now visit the beach and the park for the first time since December. Restaurants, bars and pubs are allowed to sell alcohol again up until 10 p.m. and the nationwide curfew has been pushed back until 11 p.m. So really quite a significant easing of the measures here. But the South African president did suggest that we all need to remain cautious. He said the new strain of the virus that was discovered here is more infectious than the original COVID-19 that we've all got to know over the last year or so. And he also suggested that, it's really important that masks remain on, that busy indoor gatherings are avoided. And he said where possible, it really is quite important to remain working from home.
So after a slow start, Africa has shifted up a gear in sourcing coronavirus vaccines, hundreds of millions of doses so far. According to the World Health Organization, the hope is that up to 30% of the continent's people could be vaccinated by the end of the year. Julia has more.
Egypt, Seychelles and Mauritius were the first African countries to launch vaccination campaigns last week. Egypt and Seychelles inoculated the Chinese serum Sinopharm, while Mauritius started vaccinations with Covishield, a product made in India and donated by that country. In Morocco, the King's vaccination kicked off the national campaign on Friday, and Algeria began inoculating the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine this weekend.
الله 48 ولاية واللقاح راهو طول السنة ومنظم بطريقة علمية وبدقة.
South Africa is expected to begin its campaign in 2 weeks. According to the World Health Organization, 30% of Africa's population could be vaccinated by the end of the year, with an acceleration in mid-February when the first of the 670 million vaccines ordered in the context of the COVAX initiative are delivered.
We are really hoping that the first dose is going to be started to roll out in Africa, probably by mid next month, and by March, we will definitely see most of the countries starting vaccinating.
But even if the 30% target is reached, at least twice as many people would need to be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity. Africa was relatively spared by the first wave of COVID, but there are now over 3.5 million confirmed cases, and experts believe that this figure is below the reality, with many patients confusing COVID symptoms with those of malaria.
Well, at least 5 people were killed in a terror attack in Mogadishu over the weekend. Somali police say that all 4 al-Shabaab extremists involved in the siege of the Afrique Hotel were also killed after more than 8 hours of fighting with police.
Bodies carried away in the aftermath of a car bomb attack in Mogadishu on Sunday. The blast took place in the afternoon at a hotel in the centre of the Somali capital. Gunmen then stormed the building, exchanging fire with security personnel. Somali soldiers quickly surrounded the hotel and blocked off access to it. Several people lost their lives in the attack and others were left injured. The Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist organisation Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack in a brief statement. The hotel is frequented by Somali officials, members of security forces and community leaders. Al-Shabaab has been waging a violent insurgency across Somalia, seeking to unseat the internationally backed government in Mogadishu. In 2011, they were driven out of the capital by government forces backed by 20,000 African Union peacekeepers. However, the group still controlled swathes of Somali territory from where they launch attacks against government targets, as well as occasionally crossing the border to carry out raids in Kenya.
Look now at some news in brief. Nigeria has offered to help Mozambique tackle a growing insurgency in its northern province of Cabo Delgado. There are fears that the violence could spill over to neighbouring provinces. Rebels first attacked in 2017, and since then more than 2,000 people have been killed and 500,000 forced from their homes. Nigeria has been battling an insurgency launched by Islamist militants since 2009. Its Minister of Foreign Affairs met with Mozambique's premier over the weekend and offered Abuja's support. South Africa's ex-president has dug his heels in further and said that he will not appear before an anti-graft panel looking into allegations of corruption carried out during his 9 years in power. Despite a court order that he testify, Jacob Zuma insists that he will not cooperate. He accuses the commission that's investigating the looting of state coffers during his tenure of bias. Zuma came to power in 2009 but was forced to resign in 2018 following a raft of scandals and accusations of abuse of power. Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine has filed a Supreme Court challenge against last month's election results that returned President Yoweri Museveni for a sixth term in office. Bobi Wine came second in the polls and says that the vote was rigged. He and his supporters were often targeted by security forces following some of the worst pre-election bloodshed the country has seen in years. Museveni declared the election the cleanest in Uganda's history. Judges must rule on Wine's petition within 45 days. Now, the UK has announced asset and travel bans for 4 Zimbabwean security chiefs, including the heads of police and intelligence organisations. The new sanctions are in response to the deaths of 23 people in crackdowns against civilians in 2018 and 19. The EU and the US already brought in sanctions against Zimbabweans. These are the first from Britain. Ryan Truscott has more.
Government spokesman Nick Mangwana says none of the 4 men targeted by these new sanctions has assets in the UK or has travelled there in the last 3 years. Apart from his tweet, there's been no official reaction yet from the government of Zimbabwe to this announcement. That will come in the next day or so. 2 of the men targeted by these asset and travel bans are already on the US sanctions list. They are the Security Minister Owen Nube and the head of the Presidential Guard Anselm Sanyatwe. The other 2 are Police Chief Godwin Matanga and the head of the Secret Service Isaac Moyo. The UK says the sanctions don't affect Zimbabweans. They only affect these 4 men who played a key role in security clampdowns in Harare and other cities, in post-election protests in 2018 and fuel riots in 2019 that left 23 people dead. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says these were the worst human rights violations in Zimbabwe since President Emmerson Mnangagwa took power. What a number of analysts are pointing out is that Zimbabwe under Mnangagwa pursued a policy of re-engagement with Britain. There are certainly questions now about the future of that. And while there have been a number of voices supporting this move from inside the country today, as yet there's been no reaction from the main opposition party of Nelson Chamisa. In the past, the government has accused the MDC of lobbying for sanctions on Zimbabwe, and that may well explain why the party's weighing up its public response today.
And finally, an endangered giraffe has taken to the waters as conservationists rescued it from the rising tide around Longicharo Island on Kenya's Lake Baringo. The serene images belie the urgency of the work as several animals remain trapped.
We are moving basically all the giraffes out of the island because over time the lake water has risen and its habitat has really reduced. in terms of forage, and also the area from which these animals can free range and graze. We still have quite a number, 6 actually giraffes, including the recent young one which was born in December. This is a process that we are trying to look at a case or day-by-day scenario. The moment we train these remaining giraffes, the moment they are ready, we move them. But the target is to move these animals by maybe April, May, latest May, around there. Then we'll have moved all the animals.
And we wish them the very best on their mission. That is, though, all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.